Hi, Professor Dyer here, talking about teaching research in human development and family science. Are you considering changing the textbook you use to teach your methods class? Or are you setting out to teach methods for the first time and looking for somewhere to start? If so, please let me tell you about my experience teaching methods in HDFS, why I eventually wrote a book to use in my class, and why I think you might want to consider using it too. I've been a professor of child and family science at Fresno State for many years. I think I'm going into my 25th year. We have a large undergraduate population, only teach undergraduate students. Most of them are first generation college students. We're preparing students for careers working with children and families. Some of our students go on to get a teaching credential or become licensed therapists or counselors, but very few pursue research in graduate school. As a result, they are very likely to view a research methods class with some skepticism. After all, they don't see themselves ever doing research in their future work. Nonetheless, I want them to know how science works. I consider this part of basic scientific literacy that characterizes a college-educated person. I also want them to be able to recognize the difference between knowledge generated scientifically and lessons learned from common sense or personal experience. Truth be told, I also want a chance to wow them with the power of science, which is what happened to me when I took a research methods class as an undergraduate student. I didn't plan to be a scientist. I did not know that would be my path. But that methods class really changed everything for me. And yes, I do have some hope that some of my students will have a similar experience. I want to change their minds. I want to surprise them and delight them with knowledge generated using scientific methods. I want to inspire them to pursue knowledge throughout their lives. So yes, we in my department require undergraduate students in HDFS to take a research methods class because we think it's important, and I suspect you do too. But I had a hard time teaching this class when I started many years ago because I had a hard time finding an appropriate textbook. I've tried using general social science research methods books. I've tried using psychology methods books. I've tried using sociology methods books. The first big problem I encountered with all of these is that none of these books use examples that are particularly relevant in HDFS. My students come in skeptical about research methods. When the book doesn't speak to any of the issues that they care about, they take that as confirmation that this content is really not related to their interest in children and families. That's a problem. I thought I could deal with that by offering my own examples as part of my class sessions, but I encountered another big problem. Methods in HDFS are simply bigger, more comprehensive than what is contained in any single book from a particular discipline. Because we are interdisciplinary, we borrow methods from a wide range of social science disciplines. I wanted my students to have an overview of many of those methods to see how they've been used to produce the knowledge that we use in our professions. I didn't want a methods book that would drill down on just one or two of those methods, but I couldn't find this kind of breadth anywhere. Sociology books generally talk about sampling, but psych books don't. Psych books talk about longitudinal designs, but sociology books don't. Sociology addresses survey methods, and psychology addresses experimental designs, but neither talks about both. And these are just a couple of examples. Whatever book I used, there were just big gaps. So then I tried using a combination of chapters out of books from multiple disciplines, a few chapters out of the psych book, a few chapters out of the soc book, etc. There were still some things missing, honestly, but this strategy created a third big problem: the lack of consistent terminology. I found myself explaining that the authors from different disciplines were simply using different words for the same concept. After all, disciplines have different conventions. Is it a quasi-experiment or a pre-experiment? Is it a confound or a covariate? The terminology is already confusing. And this just made it catastrophically so. Teaching methods is already pretty difficult, and I did not need this extra level of confusion. And, as if that were not bad enough, in addition to some important concepts still being missing, there was a lot of extra unnecessary material in there. The existing books, I think, are written as primers for students learning how to do research. They're not really for students who are learning how to read and interpret research. So a lot of details just aren't necessary for my students. I'm preparing them to be consumers of research, and at a very basic introductory level. I need a relatively short book if I wanted to get them to read it. Assigning a 500-page book really sends the wrong message, I think. So, I started writing a chapter here and a chapter there to help fill in the gaps and reduce some of the unnecessary complexity. Then during the COVID lockdown, when I was at home stressing out about teaching anyway, I finished it up and I put all those chapters together into a book. For a couple of years, I used the draft book in my class, making modifications based on student responses, organizing the book differently, shortening chapters that they hated, lengthening chapters that they were confused about. And at this point, it's published. And I'm delighted to share it with other HDFS professors out there in case others might find it useful. Here's what I think are some of the most important distinguishing features of the book. First, it's specific to HDFS. The examples are simply all relevant. I've selected studies to use as examples that address the wide range of topics that show up in our curriculum, that reflect the curricular areas common in HDFS programs. Some of them are classic studies that they have probably heard referenced in other classes. As I say to them in class, you've probably heard the results of this study, but now we're going to talk about how they got those results. Second, I frame the book as a contrast between using science and using, on the other hand, common sense and personal experience. I want students to see how common sense can sometimes lead us to the wrong conclusions, and how professionals need to have a broader and deeper understanding of the content than can possibly be achieved by just common sense and personal experience. I also want them to see how scammers are always using the techniques of pseudoscience to exploit children and families. This emphasis on pseudoscience helps interest students in a methods class. For instance, all of them think they have a learning style. So when they see that on the list of pseudosciences, they get very interested. It's also a practical goal for this class to help students spot when the people they serve and advocate for are being scammed. It's empowering in that way. Third, and finally, this is a book about how science works very generally. It includes both quantitative and qualitative methods, demonstrating how they are similar to and different from each other. It includes methods used to achieve all of those prevalence statistics that we like to cite on our favorite topic. It describes methods used to determine if an intervention works or not. It does all of these things. It includes guidance for how to read and critique studies with multiple different designs. It includes some numerical and statistical literacy, but I've tried to spread that out so it's not too intimidating because it's all in the same place. And it's mostly conceptual. I would call this a gentle but inspirational introduction to the world of research methods for students who might not be that excited at the beginning of class to be there. Well, thanks for considering my book. I'd be happy to talk to you about any aspect of the book or the class that I teach with it. But I hope this introduction oriented you a bit to the book and the approach to the class, and that you'll take a look at the book to see if it will work for you. Thanks.